Pancakes are one of the most iconic breakfasts, and so many recipes claim to have the best. So we spent several weeks and tried out a few techniques, and we found what it actually takes to make the best, fluffiest buttermilk pancakes ever. The right amount of flour is crucial to achieving a fluffy pancake, and so many recipes vary in terms of how much they call for. So we experimented to find the exact proportion needed for the perfect pancake. So if you use too little flour, in this case 2 cups, you end up with a pancake that tastes really great, but it's really flat. Too much flour creates a deceivingly thick pancake. Sure, it looks great, but it lacks flavor and it's really just too dense. I mean, it kind of tastes like eating, like baked flour. No one wants it. We found the sweet spot is 2.5 cups of flour. Your pancakes will be light, fluffy, and delicious. Pro tip, make sure you measure the flour correctly by spooning it into the measuring cup and then leveling it with a straight edge. If you scoop the flour directly with the cup or just pack it right in, whatever you make is gonna be way too dense. Now, flour isn't the only thing that affects how pillowy your pancakes are. To up their fluff factor, you're gonna need a leavener. Leaveners are those ingredients that allow food to rise when cooking or baking. These are things like yeast, baking powder, and baking soda. If you use only baking soda, your pancakes will rise but taste too soapy. If you use just baking powder, which is a mixture of baking soda and cream of tartar, it'll taste like aluminum foil. We use a mixture of both because when they work together, you'll get the perfect amount of lift from the combination of baking soda, along with the right amount of tang from the cream of tartar and the baking powder. So now that we've got all that settled, let's prep our dry ingredients. This is pretty straightforward. Add the sugar, salt, baking powder, and baking soda to the flour and whisk to combine. Now, there's nothing more classic than using buttermilk for your pancakes. That said, if you find yourself in a pinch, you can actually make your own. It's pretty simple. Just add a few tablespoons of lemon juice or vinegar to whole milk and let it stand for 5 to 10 minutes. Once you see the milk start to curdle, you can use it just like buttermilk. Yeah, up close it looks a little weird. We also did an experiment to see if using buttermilk powder would enhance the fluffiness of our pancakes. And it actually did affect the texture, but the buttermilk flavor was completely lost. Now we're gonna move on to our wet ingredients. Add the buttermilk, melted butter, and egg yolks, and again, whisk together. Yeah, it's a lot of butter, but you're making pancakes. You want them to be buttery and flavorful and delicious. Make your life better with butter. Okay, this seems simple, but this is actually a make or break moment. You're gonna add the buttermilk mixture to the dry ingredients and gently mix it until just combined. I really wanna emphasize to not overmix your batter. That'll result in dense, flat pancakes. You also wanna use a rubber spatula instead of a whisk. That'll help you just gently fold the ingredients together. Now, eggs are the final, super important part of guaranteeing that you'll achieve picture-perfect fluffy pancakes. I cannot stress this enough. They're also the most debated. We found that adding a whole egg all at once doesn't actually result in any fluffiness. You should add the egg white separate from the egg yolk, because on its own, the egg white has different properties than if you were to add the whole egg all at once. The most popular method is to add the egg yolk to the batter, then beat the separated white into soft peaks before folding it in. This does work, but we actually found that you can save yourself some time by adding the separated, unbeaten egg white on its own to get a pancake that's just as fluffy. I mean, who really wants to break out the hand mixer at 7 a.m.? Am I right? Now we're gonna add the unwhipped egg white on its own. And again, fold it until just combined. You don't wanna see any of that snotty egg, but you also don't want it to be too mixed in. This may look undermixed, but some lumps and small pockets of flour are actually what you want the batter to look like. At this point, let the batter rest for 15 to 30 minutes so all the ingredients can really get to know each other. While it may not seem super important, the pan you use can radically impact how your pancakes look. You can absolutely use a nonstick pan if you want. Its smooth surface will guarantee that your pancakes are flat and uniform. However, we prefer a cast iron. The rough surface of the cast iron will give your pancakes these glorious craggy pockets, perfect for soaking up all that butter and syrup you're gonna put on top. Set your pan over medium heat with a tablespoon of butter. Yes, more butter. You can use oil if you want to, but it'll make your pancakes taste more like a donut rather than a pancake, which is fine if, that's your thing. Once the butter melts and starts to bubble, turn the heat down to medium-low to ensure that everything cooks evenly. We found that a hefty 1/3 cup of batter gives us the ideal size pancakes, but you can make them as big or as small as you want. This is also the time for you to customize your pancakes with blueberries, chocolate chips, whatever you want. I'm a berry type of girl myself, but you can go crazy. So after a few minutes, you're gonna start to see these bubbles pop up on the surface. That's your green light to flip your pancake. Don't be discouraged if your first pancake doesn't look great. It usually takes a few tries. And no one has to know. It's a snack just for you. You don't need to let the pancake cook for too long on the side since it did most of the cooking before you flipped it. Just a minute or two to get that golden brown bottom. That's pretty much it. We like ours with more butter, shocker, it's tasty, and lots of maple syrup. And there you have it. You've got yourself the perfect stack of fluffy buttermilk pancakes. Sure, they aren't the most complicated thing to make, and don't take that long, but if you really want to upgrade your weekend, skip the box mix. Take the extra time to follow these steps we've taught you, and we can guarantee that they'll be some of the best pancakes you've ever had. We mean it. We can't stop making them.
I know that I say that there's nothing better than a lot, but waking up on Christmas morning or big holiday when all your family are in town to the smell of cinnamon rolls is heavenly. There's really nothing better. So this is an old recipe that we kind of perfected a few years ago when we did our first homemade cinnamon rolls recipe. A lot of people have made them and they had a lot of comments or questions about the recipe. So we thought this was like a perfect time to answer those questions and really make sure that you guys totally nail it this holiday season. So before we get started, what we want to first do is bloom our yeast. But what we want is warm milk to bloom it in. By warm, I just mean if you put your finger into the milk, it shouldn't feel like anything. It should kind of feel like your body temperature, and that's the perfect temperature. It could be a little bit warmer than that, but that's pretty much what we're going for. We're going to put in a little bit of granulated sugar, and that's going to dissolve in the milk. We're also going to put in some melted butter. So this is going to be an enriched dough. We talked about enriched doughs when we did the dinner rolls, so it's pretty similar. It's just going to be a little bit sweeter and a little bit more rich from more butter. So we're going to stir it around just to make sure that the sugar and the butter are kind of equally incorporated into the milk. And then we're going to put a packet of yeast over this. Stir that once more to make sure that all of the little yeast particles are totally hydrated. We're going to leave this to go for about 10 minutes. You want to put this in a pretty warm place so that the yeast can bloom. A cold environment will slow down the yeast growth. What we're looking for here is like some bubbles. You can see some action. It's actually kind of growing. And to this, we're going to add 4 cups of flour. It's going to make a really wet, messy dough, and that's exactly what we want. Stir that together to make sure that everything's equally hydrated. We don't want any flour pockets or anything. You can see at this point it's a little bit lumpy, so I'm just gonna stir it a little bit more until I'm beating out a few of those lumps. It doesn't need to be totally smooth at this point. It just needs to be kind of brought together and homogeneous. So once I'm happy, I'm going to cover this with cling film and let it rise for an hour. Again, if you're not seeing much growth, move it to a warmer part of your kitchen. That should help a little bit. While this rises, let's butter our tins. As with cakes or baking or whatever, you want to make sure that you're ready to go. So just take one of the butter wrappers and rub it all over the inside of your tin just to make sure that the rolls won't stick after they come out of the oven. And now let's move on to make the filling. And our filling consists of light brown sugar, very softened butter, can't emphasize that enough, and cinnamon. In our original video, we put on the softened butter and then the brown sugar and cinnamon separately, and it's actually a lot easier if you just combine them all and then spread them on evenly. And you're not having any parts that don't have one of those ingredients. So we're happy here, it's just a little bit less than doubled in size. The yeast is definitely alive in this dough. You can see all these little bubbles here. So you can just poke it if you want, just because it's always fun to poke frozen dough. And at this point, we're gonna add the other cup of flour, the baking powder, and the salt. And we're adding salt to this, of course, as a flavor enhancer. It's not gonna make the dough salty, just gonna enhance all the flavors that we're gonna put into it later. It's going to seem really dry at first, but what we're gonna keep doing is stir this as best as we can. It's gonna be this scraggly dough at first. It's gonna seem really dry, but trust me, there's plenty of liquid in this dough. It's gonna become sticky again before you know it. One of the comments that we saw on our original cinnamon roll video, people thought that they needed a lot of extra flour. And I just want to encourage you guys, with bread dough, actually wetter is better. So try to use the least amount of flour that you can. I'm going to put a little bit of bench flour on the side of my board here, and I don't really want to use it all. And this should be enough to knead our dough as well as roll it out later. So don't use too much of it if you don't need to. All of these little bits on the side, those will come together in the dough. So you can see it's pretty sticky at this point. The humidity in the air, how old your flour is, all of that will determine how much extra flour that you need. We made this dough 5 or 6 times, and sometimes we needed a lot of extra flour and sometimes we didn't. So it's kind of up to you. The more that you make these, the easier this will become. But I just want you to be aware that you want to use the least amount of flour. I can't say it enough that you need. So it's the same process that you would do any other kneading technique, and however you want to do it is up to you. I kind of fold, push, and twist, and what you're really trying to do is just work every part of the dough. As you can see, the dough is sticking to the board quite a lot, as well as my hands, and that's just a sign that I do in fact need more flour. So I'm going to sprinkle a little bit over, a little on the board as well, work that in before I add any more. So you really want to be kneading for about 10 minutes until the dough is super smooth. It is bouncing back when you push your finger into it. Once I'm happy with this part, we are ready to roll. So go ahead and scrape off the table, make sure you're working with like a clean surface, put a little bit of extra flour out because we don't want our dough sticking to the board. And at this point, I'm just gonna stick my fingers in, start to stretch it out a little bit. You want to get it into the shape that you're going for as early as you can. Because we kneaded so well and it's an enriched dough, it's actually really easy to work with and it'll stretch without tearing too much. This is actually a perfect thing to do in the winter because you don't want the dough, especially at this point, to be too warm, because it'll make it a little bit harder to work with. I'm always pulling and then I'm using my bench scraper, or if you have like a spatula at home, I mean, you can use a lot of different things, anything that's straight. I just want to make sure that we have pretty tight corners. So when we get to that stage, it's just going to be much easier to work with if you're working with a really nice rectangle shape. I actually like to plop the filling down in little sections instead of kind of putting it all in one place and then moving it around. It's just a lot easier to spread. You can see that I'm really spreading this all the way to the edge. If you have an even layer, you'll get that really, really nice shape as well when you roll it up. So take your time here. It's really satisfying to spread because it's like so buttery, honestly. Whichever way you want to work, left to right, right to left, we want to start on one edge and be as even as you can. Take your time here so we have a really nice roll. If you use the length of your hand to help push it, or even at some points I was using my forearm, you want to make sure that you're getting a really even, tight roll all the way. And then use the weight of that roll to close that seam. And if there's a particularly fat part of the roll, you can kind of spread it a little bit with your hands. You can kind of stretch it ever so slightly because you want to make sure that the roll is really even so that your rolls rise really evenly and they bake evenly as well. One hack that we learned after making these so many times is to use dental floss to cut the rolls, because the dental floss actually cuts the entire slice from the outside in, whereas a knife kind of pushes from the top down and squishes the slices. It ensures that you get a perfect spiral with your slices when it's done. If they're not really holding their shape, go ahead and throw them in the fridge for 5 or 10 minutes and then kind of roll them between your hands a little bit to make sure that you're getting a good shape, and then put them into your buttered tins. This is kind of as much as you can fit in there. You don't want to jam pack them too much because these are going to expand a little bit more once we proof them. Proofing is just kind of like that second rise before they go into the oven. So it's okay, there's a little bit of space here. The rolls will expand a little bit. We're going to cover these with a towel and let these proof for about 35 to 45 minutes. This is a good place if you were doing these ahead of time to freeze them. So before they proof, cover them with cling film, put them in the freezer. These can stay in the freezer up to 3 months. And then when you're ready for them, you can defrost them in the fridge overnight, or you can leave them out for a few hours at room temperature. Go ahead and throw them in the oven. They might take a little bit longer, depending how cold they are when you put them in, but just keep an eye on them. They're still like just as good out of the freezer, so. Proofing is going to give you those really fluffy rolls. So this is an important step, like you don't want to skip this. So you want your rolls to have expanded by up to half of their original size. This is going in at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 25 to 30 minutes. Keep an eye on them. The outer ones will cook a little bit faster, so you want to make sure that that middle one is cooked through. If they are getting too dark on the top and not cooking on those seams, just go ahead and turn the oven down to like 320 to finish off the cooking so they don't brown too much. While our buns are in the oven, we're going to make the frosting. You could just do a basic powdered sugar water glaze if you wanted to, but it's the holidays, so let's bump it up a little bit. We're gonna add cream cheese, you know we love it, adds a little tanginess, cuts the sweetness a little bit, melted butter, and then we're gonna use milk and vanilla to flavor our icing. We wanna use powdered sugar here instead of granulated sugar because it's so much more finely ground. That's gonna make sure that the sugar dissolves really easily in the liquids. So go ahead and get all of your ingredients into the bowl first, except for the powdered sugar. We want to make sure that all these ingredients are very well creamed together and there's no lumps before we add the powdered sugar. Seriously, make sure that your cream cheese is room temperature, like very soft. It'll just incorporate so much easier if it's pretty warm. This is a really good standard cream cheese recipe because it's not too cream cheesy. I don't like when it's too cream cheesy, so this is like the perfect amount of cream cheesiness. So once everything's very smooth, we're gonna gradually add our powdered sugar. Just add like a little bit at a time, especially when you get started. And this is just to ensure, again, that there's no lumps. If you are the type of person that really loves icing, you could make double of this. So you just gotta tell us in the comments if this was enough icing for you and your family. And there's your perfectly smooth, perfectly runny icing. So you'll be able to pour this right over the hot rolls and it'll be perfection. Once they come out of the oven, you want to make sure that you're not putting the glaze on when they're too hot. Leave them to cool for like at least 10 minutes, because if you put the icing on when it's too warm, the icing is just going to completely melt and it's not going to be like that really nice glaze on top. And now for the fun part, the drizzling over. I start on the outside and go towards the middle, but it's kind of up to your preference, how much you like kind of drowning in icing, if you only like a little bit. You can use the back of a spoon to kind of spread the rest of the icing out, just so that every little nook and cranny gets a little bit of icing. You could also just put this on the table and let people put their icing on it themselves if you want. This is like, whew, gorgeous. I mean, look at that icing on those rolls. All that hard work, and look how beautiful. Like, this is super smooth icing over these warm cinnamon rolls. I mean, I just wish you guys could smell these. If you smelled this, you guys would immediately go and make these cinnamon rolls. Like, they smell so, so good. This is one of our original Tasty recipes that we just really love and have become family favorite here at Tasty, so we hope you enjoy them as much as we did.
Omelets are a satisfying, show-stopping way of upgrading your breakfast game, and odds are you already have everything you need to create one. They say you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. Well, we cracked hundreds to test the best tips, tricks, and techniques so we could show you our recipes for the 3 most essential omelets. First up, the French omelet. To some, the French omelet is arguably the most famous and technically challenging. Soft on the outside and custardy on the inside, this omelet is easier to make than most people think. There are only 4 ingredients in this recipe, so it's really important that they're the freshest you can find, especially the eggs. As eggs get old, the membrane inside slowly breaks down, becoming more liquidy, resulting in a flatter and sadder omelet. Fresher eggs have a more robust interior, making the omelet even fluffier. Start by cracking your eggs in a large bowl. Don't worry if you see any of these white, stringy bits, also known as the coulées. They're totally normal and won't affect the taste or texture of your omelet. You want to beat the eggs until they're completely combined. You don't want to see any stringy bits of yolk or white floating around. Whisk, whisk, whisk. Next, we're adding water. As the omelet cooks, the water will become steam, allowing it to rise. When tested, the omelet with the water was noticeably fluffier than both the one without water and the one with cold butter added while cooking. Lastly, add the salt and whisk again. Let the mixture stand for about 10 to 15 minutes to allow the salt to work its magic. As the salt dissolves, a couple things start happening. It evenly distributes throughout, giving the omelet consistent seasoning and helps give it a fluffy texture. Just a heads up, your eggs may get deeper in color. This is totally normal. If anything, it'll actually make the omelet look even better. Like Instagram worthy, you know what I'm saying? Make sure you choose a pristine non-stick pan. Eggs are notoriously sticky if given the chance. Classically, French omelets are made over high heat, but we found medium is actually much better for beginners and yielded similarly delicious results. Add the butter and just let it do its thing until it just barely starts to foam. Like with the eggs, make sure to use good, unsalted butter. We recommend European style, which has a higher fat content. Remember, more fat means more flavor. Also, this is a French omelet, so, staying in line. The next bit requires some coordination. Add the eggs to the pan while using a spatula to scrape the curds up from the bottom and the sides. You want to keep moving them around so that they stay on the smaller side. Remember, smaller curds, better omelet. In a few minutes, the eggs will become softly scrambled and custardy. Reduce the heat to low, and using your spatula, gently spread everything into an even layer. If there are any pools of undercooked egg, give the pan a gentle shake to distribute them. Everything should be wet, not runny, and hold its shape. With the heat turned off, slowly and carefully roll the omelet up, adding a bit of butter to the pan so the eggs unstick more easily. It's a little pro tip for you. Once completely rolled, make sure the seam side is facing down so everything is sealed up. This might sound excessive, but brush the omelet with even more butter. This gives it a glossy appearance and makes the surface sticky enough for garnishes to adhere to it. I mean, again, French omelet, French butter, more butter, it's a whole vibe. We prefer ours with the classic combination of fresh chives and flaky sea salt. And voila, you've made a French omelet. A word of advice, don't waste any time. It's best enjoyed fresh out of the pan. The interior should still be creamy and custardy, and with a little bit of practice, you can become a master in no time. The American omelet, the American omelet, the American omelet, the American omelet. Okay, let's talk about American omelets. So maybe you want an omelet that's a little bit less fussy, or maybe you just want to add a ton of toppings. Golden brown on the outside, packed with flavor on the inside, the American-style omelet is the one for you. To get started, like with the French omelet, we found that salting the eggs ahead of time greatly improved the fluffiness factor. We also found that water had a significant impact on texture. Other additives like cream actually give the omelet a significantly denser texture. Who would have thought? Beat the mixture until well combined, then set aside for 10 to 15 minutes. While the eggs rest, let's talk about toppings, the best part. The ratio is key. We found that a 1/4 cup of cooked filling per 2 eggs works best. You can use whatever ingredients you want. Just remember some fillings, like spinach or mushrooms, contain more water than others, so it's important to cook them down to prevent the omelet from getting too loose and watery. In a pan over medium-high heat, add the butter. Once melted, add the vegetables, and cook until softened. We're going with a classic combination of onions and peppers. Finally, if using, add your choice of meat. We went with ham, and cook until browned and crispy. Transfer the toppings to a bowl and set aside. Make sure to give the pan a good wipe to remove any burnt or sticky bits that, could mess with your omelet. Add the butter and let it cook until browned and nutty. This is what's going to give the omelet a lot of its trademark golden brown crust. Add the eggs to the pan. As they begin to set, use a spatula to push them from the edge to the center, tipping the pan as needed to allow the mixture to spread and cook evenly. The curds should be larger than those in the French omelet. You can tell it's ready when the eggs are set, but the top still appears wet. Turn off the heat, then add the toppings over the egg, finishing it off with your choice of cheese. We went with a nice cheddar. Cover the pan with a lid and let everything stand for a minute or two while the residual heat finishes the omelet and melts the cheese. Oh, yum. Finally, loosen and fold the omelet in half, then transfer to a plate to serve. And there you have it. That's how to make an American-style omelet. It should be golden brown on the outside with a cheesy, fluffy interior. It's delicious, it's filling, it's pretty hard to beat. But we're not quite done yet. Bum ba ba! The Japanese omelet, tamagoyaki. If you've never tried a Japanese omelet, prepare to have your mind blown. While some people spend years perfecting this artful omelet, with a bit of practice, you'll be rolling this at home in no time. Start by beating the eggs until they're well combined, but not overbeaten to the point of being bubbly or frothy. Next, add the sugar, salt, soy sauce, and mirin. You can also use sake. Feel free to adjust the amounts depending on how sweet or savory you want the omelet to be. We prefer a balance somewhere in the middle. Dashi stock adds a ton of umami to the omelet. We used powdered dashi, which only needs water. A word of caution, don't add too much or the eggs will become too delicate to handle, making them really challenging to roll. We found our sweet spot to be about 1 tablespoon of dashi per egg. Add the dashi stock and whisk everything together until incorporated. And a quick pro tip, transfer the mixture to a measuring cup to make it easier to pour while cooking. Or, you could also just whisk it in one to begin with. Normally, Japanese omelets are made using a purpose-built pan, which we easily found on Amazon. The square configuration makes it ideal for rolling the omelet into its iconic shape. However, a normal nonstick fry pan works just as well. You'll just need to trim the edges of the omelet once all is said and done. That part's really easy. Set the pan over medium-high heat. Once at temperature, brush generously with oil using chopstick and a folded piece of paper towel. Make sure to get those corners too. You could also totally use a silicone brush. Don't skimp on the oil. Make sure the pan is totally coated. Add enough egg to coat the bottom of the pan, swirling it around to create an even layer. It should also sizzle and bubble a little when first added, but the heat shouldn't be so high that the eggs brown. If your omelet starts to brown, you've gone too far. Just start over, it's fine. And a word of advice. If your pan is too hot, rather than fiddle with the stove controls, raise and lower the pan off the heat to keep everything from overcooking. Just make sure things don't get too cool, or else the egg will stick to the pan. When the bottom of the eggs are set and the top is still a bit wet, you know it's ready to roll. Gently start rolling the egg towards yourself. If it tears a bit, that's okay. Don't worry. These will disappear as you continue layering the egg. Once fully rolled, push it to the opposite side of the pan. Keep repeating each step, oiling, pouring, setting, rolling, and pushing, until all the egg mixture is used up. By this point, the omelet should resemble its final form. We prefer to slice ours into quarters. Look at all those amazing layers. They're so pretty. You can really see every layer. It's kind of like a little mini crepe cake. Serve it with a bit of grated daikon radish and some soy sauce. The perfect Japanese omelet should be boxy, pale yellow, with a custardy spiral of egg throughout its center. Perfect for impressing guests, or, most importantly, yourself. And there you have it, the 3 essential omelets every cook should have in their roster. Whether it's the classic French omelet, the fulfilling American omelet, or the beautiful Japanese omelet, you're now guaranteed to have a stellar recipe for any occasion. What's your perfect omelet? Let us know in the comments below. These recipes are all available on tasty.co.
This iconic dish is all about the details. French toast might look super simple to make, but looks can be deceiving. French toast is crispy on the outside, that silky custard on the inside. It's just so indulgent and delicious. What's not to love? So over the last couple of weeks, we've eaten a ton of butter and bread and syrup to find out what makes the best classic French toast recipe. French toast is only as good as its bread, so that's where we'll start. There are a ton of options out there, and we tested a bunch of them. For French toast, we want to use a bread that's both sturdy on the outside and spongy and tender on the inside. Something like a brioche, challah, or white bread. We also tested milk bread, Hawaiian bread, and sourdough, but found they really altered the flavor profile of the dish. Ultimately, challah was our favorite. We don't recommend buying a pre-sliced loaf because we want our slices to be the perfect thickness. If they're too thin, they'll fall apart with the weight of the custard. But if they're too thick, it'll be difficult to cook the custard all the way through, and nobody wants raw custard. We think about 1 inch to 1.5 inches is the perfect thickness. Now, this next part might seem counterintuitive, but we don't want to use fresh bread. We want it to be at least a day old. Using fresh bread will result in dense and soggy toast. But don't worry if you need French toast right now and your bread isn't ready. Just bake your slices at 200 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 minutes to dry them out, and then you'll be ready to make your custard. The custard is really where the magic happens when it comes to French toast. The perfect custard creates a crispy exterior with a silky rich interior. If you use too much milk or a lot of sugar in your custard, the egg won't cook and you'll get wet and soggy toast. So a good rule we follow is that for about every 1/4 cup of dairy, we use 1 large egg. For our recipe, we'll be using 6 large eggs. It's important to thoroughly whisk the eggs so you don't end up with clumps of egg whites in your custard that will ruin an otherwise perfectly golden brown piece of toast. Then we'll add our milk, heavy cream, brown sugar, and salt. Finally, we're going to add our seasoning. Seasoning your custard is crucial. Now you can definitely get fancy with it by adding things like cardamom, orange zest, nutmeg, cloves, ginger, lemon zest, or even liqueurs. But we found that less is more when it comes to seasoning. So we're just adding a little cinnamon and some vanilla paste. You can totally make this with vanilla extract, but we think it's worth the upgrade to use vanilla bean paste. It just packs a bigger vanilla punch, and it's still cheaper than vanilla beans. We'll whisk all of our custard ingredients together until it's well combined. Remember, we don't want any egg clumps. Now that our custard's ready, let's add our bread. We want to make sure the custard completely soaks the bread, but we don't want to soak it for so long that it begins to disintegrate. Yeah, it's just super gross. So we'll soak the bread until it begins to feel heavy in our hands and completely saturated throughout. This could mean anywhere from 20 seconds to a minute on each side. Now that our bread has taken a little custard bath, it's time to cook. We tested several methods. Your cast iron has to be seasoned super well or your bread will end up sticking to the pan. The oven is a great method for making big batches, but doesn't get the crispy edges we want in a truly great French toast. So ultimately, we love using a non-stick electric griddle. It distributes heat evenly across its entire surface, and it's also big enough to cook large batches of toast at a time. But if you don't have a griddle, a non-stick pan works just as well. Now, to get a golden brown crispy toast, it's crucial to preheat whatever pan you choose. By preheating the pan, the custard will begin to cook immediately. If the pan's cold from the start, the custard will spread to form a foot, something like this, on the bottom of the toast. We recommend preheating your pan before you start making your custard. Once our pan is hot enough, we'll lightly grease it with a pat of butter. Or something a little more than a pat. We like our butter here at Tasty. Once all of that butter is melted, we'll place the soaked toast on the pan and let it cook undisturbed until the bottom is golden brown, which takes about 2 minutes. Then we'll flip and repeat on the other side. Ooh, she's pretty. Just look at how crispy and golden brown that is. Make sure to keep an eye on your heat as you cook. If it's too high, the sugar in the custard will burn before the custard is cooked through all the way in the middle. Once your toast is looking beautiful, we'll remove it from the pan. And here's a little tip. Wipe your pan between batches to make sure the butter doesn't continue to cook and leave burnt patches on the remaining toast. Now that we've whipped up perfect golden brown crispy toast, it's time to serve. You can really get creative with the toppings for this. Use whipped cream, chocolate syrup, sprinkles, bananas. You can go wild. But we think that less is more. We love to serve ours with a pat of butter and some maple syrup. Did you know that there's a difference between pure maple syrup and pancake syrup? Pancake syrup is actually made with corn syrup and maple flavoring. It's definitely a more affordable and shelf-stable alternative. But if you can splurge, we love using warm, pure maple syrup. Drizzle that right over the top of your toast, and if you want to get fancy with it, finish with a little flaky sea salt. The sea salt really complements the sweetness in the custard and syrup. We like to add a little pop of color, so we'll serve ours with a mix of berries. We're just using our favorites here. And we're done! All that's left to do now is enjoy your work of art with your friends and your family on a wonderful brunch afternoon, or just indulge by yourself. Either way, if you loaf this recipe, you can find it and many more on our website at tasty.co. What's not to love when it comes to croissants? Flaky on the outside, soft and buttery on the inside, they might just be our favorite French pastry. Though easy to enjoy, croissants can be difficult to perfect, especially if you're making them at home. The process takes practice and a lot of patience, but trust us when we say it's worth it. We tested hundreds of croissants to bring you the best classic croissant and have you baking like a pro. So let's get into it. We're going to start by making our dough. Our dough consists of 8 ingredients: milk, water, flour, sugar, salt, yeast, malt, and butter. In a large bowl, combine the milk and water. A lot of croissant recipes call for just water, but we found that a combination of water and whole milk creates that tender crumb we want. The added sugar from the milk will also help us achieve that deep copper color. Okay, next we'll add the flour. We're using bread flour because it's high in protein and one of the strongest flours available. It's going to help provide the structural support for our dough. The extra protein in bread flour makes for better volume, chewier crumb, and more browning in the crust. Now we'll add our sugar, salt, yeast, and malt for extra flavor. The last ingredient for our dough is unsalted butter. Not all croissant recipes use butter in the dough, but we found that a small amount of butter fat in the dough helps during the lamination process. We'll mix this together with our hands until the dough resembles a shaggy mass. We don't want to develop gluten here. We just want to hydrate the flour and create a unified dough. Trust your instincts here. If your dough feels too wet, like this, it will be more difficult to roll out, which will cause the butter to shatter when laminating. You can always add a little bit more flour here. If your dough is too dry, it'll begin to tear during rolling and eventually bake into something more similar to a bread roll than a pastry. Unfortunately, there's really no fix for this. Cover the bowl with plastic wrap or a kitchen towel and allow the dough to rest at room temperature until it rises to about 1.5 times its original size and has a slightly puffy texture. This will probably take about an hour depending on the temperature of your kitchen. Okay, this looks good. We'll punch down the dough and transfer it onto a piece of plastic wrap. Then gently press the dough into a rough 8-inch square. There we go. Then we'll wrap the dough tightly and refrigerate for at least 3 hours, but preferably overnight. Let's move on to one of the most crucial steps of croissants, the butter block, or barrage. It's really important to use a high-quality butter. We recommend using European or European-style butter because we're looking for at least 84% butter fat. That's going to help give our croissants that famous honeycomb finish. To make the butter block, place a sheet of parchment paper on a work surface with the long side nearest to you. Next, we'll slice the butter into 1/4-inch thick pieces and arrange the slices in a single layer, like tiles. Fold the edges of the parchment paper to encase the butter and flip the packet over so the seam is facing down. We'll let the butter packet rest at room temperature until it's soft but not greasy. Chilled yet pliable is what most recipes will tell you. We essentially want the butter to be a little bendy, but not break. For us, it took about 30 minutes for our butter to reach this consistency. Then we'll take a rolling pin and roll it over the packet to distribute the butter in an even layer all the way to the edges and corners, leaving no spaces between the tiles. And there you have it. Place the butter packet in the refrigerator to chill until you're ready to laminate. All right, let's laminate. First thing we need to do is lock the butter into the dough. To do this, we want to make sure that our butter and our dough are about the same temperature and texture. Simply hold the butter in one hand and the dough in the other hand and feel them. We'll dust our work surface very lightly with flour. We will use our butter block as the guide to how large we roll out our dough. We want to roll out our dough to be about the same width and about twice the height of our butter packet. Once the dough is rolled out, place the packet, butter side down, on the bottom half of the dough, leaving about a 1/2 inch of space around the edges. Once you have the butter in the correct spot, carefully peel back the parchment paper to release the butter. Now, fold the top half of the dough over the butter, stretching it ever so gently so that the edges of the dough reaches the exposed edges beneath the butter. Use the palm of your hand to gently press the side and bottom edges of the dough together to seal the packet closed. Look at this! Our dough looks sort of like a closed book. So moving forward, we'll call this the spine side and this will be the page side. We want to make sure that the butter rolls out evenly. So we'll use our rolling pin to firmly press the dough and begin distributing the butter. To release that tension from folding the dough onto itself, we'll use a serrated knife to cut down the middle of the spine. Now, make sure to orient the dough so that the split spine is closest to you and begin rolling. Continue rolling until the dough is about 12 inches high, fluffing and moving the dough to make sure it doesn't stick to our work surface. Once we have the height, we want to roll the dough until it's about 1/4 inch thick. It's time to make our first fold. Fold the bottom third of the dough up and the top third of the dough down, kind of like folding a letter, hence why we call this fold a letter fold. We want to continue rolling out to about the same size rectangle we had before with a 1/4 inch thickness. If your rectangle gets a little wild and has some rounded edges, you can use a serrated knife or a pastry wheel to straighten out the sides. We want to keep as close to a perfect rectangle as possible for optimal layers. Now we're ready for our second and final fold. Fold the left 2/3 of dough over itself to just past the center of the dough. Then fold the right third of the dough over itself towards the left so that the edges meet. Gently press the two ends together to make a seam that resembles an offset book spine. Then fold the left side of the dough over to meet the right edge of the dough. This is called a four-fold. A lot of recipes will have you resting and folding the dough 3 and 4 times to create a crazy amount of layers and show off that iconic honeycomb structure. However, we found that although fewer folds creates fewer layers, they're more distinct layers, and honestly give the croissant our favorite crumb texture, light with just enough chew. Plus, it's a little less labor intensive. Our croissants are really shaping up. But actually, let's get to shaping these babies. Now we gotta roll the dough out one more time, and you guessed it, get back down to that 1/4 inch thickness. For this next part, we like to use a pastry wheel, but you can also totally use a large chef's knife. Begin by marking 3 inches and roll the wheel from the mark diagonally towards the bottom left corner. Continue cutting the rest of the dough until you have about 10 to 12 triangles. Make a slit in the middle of the base of each triangle to help relieve some tension, and then roll them up to create that iconic crescent shape. Make sure to roll as tight as possible without applying too much pressure so that the croissants will hold its shape as it proofs and bakes. The French word croissant actually translates to crescent in English. Many historical experts believe French croissants evolved from Austrian Kipferl, a buttery and often sweet baked good shaped like a crescent moon. According to the popular legend, Kipferl dates back to 1683, when a baker heard the Ottoman Turks tunneling beneath Vienna to lay siege to it. He sounded the alarm to save the city and created Kipferl to celebrate this victory. Its curved shape supposedly symbolized the crescent moon emblem on the Ottoman flag. Kipferl eventually migrated to France and evolved into what we now know and love as the croissant. Before we get to baking, we have to proof our pastries. We like to add boiling water to a small vessel, like a ramekin, and place it on the tray under the plastic wrap while the croissants proof. Moisture is key to prevent the dough from drying out. You'll know they're ready to bake when they look like light, puffy clouds. They should slightly wobble when you shake the tray. Lastly, we'll brush them with an egg wash to give our croissants that iconic, shiny, copper brown shell. And finally, it's time to bake. We recommend placing a pan filled with boiling water at the bottom of your oven. Steam ultimately helps the dough grow before the heat traps it in its shell. Bake the croissants in the oven at 350 degrees for about 30 minutes. And before we bite into these works of perfection, we want to let them cool for about 20 minutes. And voila! Perfectly golden croissants. We think croissants taste best when baked fresh with a smear of jam or a drizzle of honey and served with your favorite breakfast beverage. The possibilities are really endless when it comes to using this laminated dough to make other beautiful, flaky pastries. This recipe is truly a labor of love, and once you nail it, the reward is insanely sweet. For this recipe and even more croissant baking tips, check out tasty.co.